Hey guys, I wanted to come in here today and share with you uh, my knowledge I have around acne and the top things your beauty therapist or your doctor isn't going to tell you about acne that you really need to know. And I have had my own personal journey and struggle with acne for quite a long time during my adult years. And I understand how painful and frustrating it can be when your skin is constantly breaking out and you're so exposed for everyone to see, and how humiliating that can be, how destroying it can be to your self-esteem. And so I want to share with you uh, the underlying drivers of what can cause acne and what you actually, so you can understand then what you actually need to address to actually get to the root cause so you can really improve it. My own personal skin story, like I've always had bad skin. From a teenager, and uh, I remember when I sort of hit puberty, I started getting pimples, and it kind of never really resolved itself. And I remember when I was about 19, I went on an oral contraceptive pill purely to clear my skin. And I actually felt like I had a really crazy experience with that, in terms of the pill made me quite depressed. I thought I was going crazy. I had a doctor that laughed at me when I told her that. I now know that that's very like common experience that people have. They feel like they kind of lose themselves a little bit, or feel like you're going a little bit crazy, and that's definitely not uncommon. But the fact that I got berated by the doctor for suggesting that, she laughed at me. I really like felt like I went into a pit of depression as soon as I went on the pill. So I came off that, and then I kind of like went on and off the pill during my 20s, and always sort of struggled with it. And it wasn't until I had my kidney out. So for those of you who don't know, I had a tumor in my kidney uh, almost 13 years ago. Back in 2010, I had to get it removed. And that was my wake up call. That was my rock bottom. That's what got me into doing what I do now, working with people with their health. And a big part of that was also me coming off the pill. And as I started to make changes and work on my health, realizing how damaging the oral contraceptive pill was. And I decided to come off it, and my skin went crazy. It was actually already not good when I was still on the pill. So it was kind of like underlying, but then when I went off it, my skin went crazy. And I remember going to a funeral actually, where I felt like I had these massive volcanoes on my chin. It was really humiliating. I'd picked them, like it made it worse. It was like awful. And I didn't even want to go to the funeral because it was like so bad, and just real cystic, terrible, horrible acne. And by that point, I started studying nutritional medicine. And I remember going to college. I actually went vegan when I first went on my journey, thinking that was the solution. And it made my skin worse. And when I was looking at what are the underlying drivers, I realized, okay, I don't think this is serving me, because a lot of the time when people go vegan, they become very carbohydrate heavy. And that's not good for insulin levels, raising blood sugar levels. And that can be a big driver of skin issues, and particularly acne. So that was my story. So when I was going through college, I was kind of like trying to work out like so desperately what was causing me issues, and didn't have it took too long to get support and to get help. And I was trying to like join all the dots together. In that journey, I also realized a lot of the root causes of my tumor was repressed anger, repressed emotion, unresolved trauma. And it wasn't actually until I really addressed the root causes of my trauma and learned how to regulate my nervous system and heal my trauma. And I started really integrating those parts of me, integrating those inner child parts that needed love and connection, that I actually felt like my hormones really started to balance out, that my skin got way better. And it didn't heal all of it, but neither did the food. But the combination of both made was amazing. And so for people who have skin issues, like if you're really susceptible to acne, like, you're more susceptible to getting blackheads. You're more like, skin is our weak spot, and we've all got weak spots. And for some people, it will manifest as, weight gain. Other people, it manifests as acne. But when I came off the pill, I had a condition was what you would call now as post-pill PCOS. And essentially, this is quite common when you come off the oral contraceptive pill, because as your hormones are kicking back into gear, because when you're on the pill, your hormones go offline completely, and your pituitary gland needs to stimulate and wake your ovaries kind of have to wake up to start making estrogen and progesterone and testosterone again. And the surge of testosterone is what can cause like polycystic ovaries, as well as acne, hair growth, that type of thing. Really common when people come off the pill and they've been on the pill for a long time. It takes a long time for a lot of women to ovulate. And so this is what I experienced. And it wasn't until I actually learnt to really regulate my nervous system that I felt like my skin dramatically improved, with the combination of really getting on top of my diet. And I know the things that are my weaknesses now. And so when I go off track, I know why, and I know how to get back on track really easy. So if my skin does flare up, it's like I know what to do now. So number one is inflammation, and inflammation comes from several different places. There's three main areas that it comes from, in my opinion. Number one is the gut, and the gut not working well, and we need that gut working well to be a reduction in inflammation. A huge amount of our immune system resides in our gut, and when the gut function is not healthy, and the lining of the gut is not tight, we have these tight junctions in our small intestine that the junctions aren't tight. We're not making the correct amount of mucus. We've got wrong bacteria in the wrong spot. The balance of bacteria in our large intestine is out of balance, like a little ecosystem. We get a lot of inflammation, and so we've actually got to really work on that gut and making sure that gut is healthy. That's number one. There is a direct correlation between skin health and gut health. So anyone with skin issues, whether it's like acne, eczema, psoriasis, you got to look at the gut and the connection between the two. And the other thing that can cause inflammation, which will drive particularly acne, if we've got cystic acne especially, is blood sugar levels and elevated insulin levels. And so when you have a very carbohydrate heavy diet, you're eating sugar, you're consuming anything that's going to raise blood sugar levels. What happens is that insulin will cause, it's insulin growth factor 1, causes testosterone to become elevated. And there's an enzyme that is increased, and more testosterone gets produced in the top layers of the skin, which actually then encourages more sebum production, which will then cause more infections in the hair follicle. And that's essentially what's happening, which is why because there's a big connection between insulin and PCOS. Some of the symptoms of PCOS are acne, hair growth, like all those high androgen symptoms, and it's connected to high insulin. And so high insulin will cause us to have an increase in high androgens, which is your group of your testosterone hormones, and that's what causes the breakouts. So think about like pubescent boys. As boys hit puberty, their testosterone rises, and often their skin will break out, and they'll get that teenage pubescent acne from the testosterone surge. It's the same with women. It's just in different forms. So we've got to look at blood sugar levels, insulin levels, the overconsumption of carbohydrates, too much sugar in the diet, too much carbohydrate in the diet. Some people respond really well to a very paleo-style diet, coming totally 100% off the sugar, becoming totally 100% off grains and refined carbohydrates, and really eating a very predominantly plants, good proteins, and good quality fats to support blood sugar, like have stable blood sugar levels and not have insulin, or to not make too much insulin. And so this is one of the big drivers. The other big driver is stress, and stress is cortisol. And when we make huge amount of levels of cortisol, again, it causes our insulin to go up, and then will cause more testosterone to be made. So there's this combination of things happening. And when I'm talking about stress, with skin, people with skin, stress is there's several ways that stress can be interpreted, and I'm talking about that background alarm a lot of the time. So the way that we actually respond to the things in our environment and the way that we regulate our nervous system. And so when we're talking about a regulated nervous system or the nervous system, it's like, do I feel safe in my own body, or am I in alarm? And if I'm in alarm, I have two responses. I'll either be in fight or flight, which is sympathetic, or I go into a state which is called dorsal, where I go into freeze, or I may fawn, which is like deer in headlights, procrastination, like I'm in survival mode. And they're two stress responses. When we are in those states, we make cortisol, we make huge levels of cortisol because we're in survival mode. And a lot of the time, this is from how we actually learn to survive and adapt as children from our caretakers. If our caretakers, as when we were kids, did not know how to meet our emotional needs, our emotions were made wrong, or we didn't actually feel safe, we didn't feel seen and heard, our response was to protect ourselves and go into this nervous system state of alarm. Problem is, now we've got this background alarm running because we've never felt safe. And a lot of the time with acne, there is this repressed emotion that is not being expressed. It can often be anger. And I know for me, like when I had my kidney out, I had a lot of repressed anger. And think about acne, it's like an explosion, particularly cystic acne. There's also this element of it's an explosion. It's like this something that's got to come out, and it doesn't know how to come out. And from the people that I've worked with and observing that, and also with myself, I know there is this repressed emotion that's happening, but it doesn't mean that the body isn't keeping score of that. It's just manifesting as a physical symptom because it hasn't got an opportunity to express itself any other way. And so this comes back to learning how to healthily express your emotions, how to healthily process your emotions, and deal with those repressed emotions so that it doesn't manifest as that background alarm and creating safety in the body. And this is really, really, really important. And this is the bit that most people miss. And looking at it from how that impacts my health as a whole. And so they're the three big ones for inflammation. Inflammation can also come from other forms like toxicity and, exposure to chemicals. That comes also back to the state of the gut, because if we're having constant exposure to different chemicals, whether they're in our skincare, our water, from pesticides, heavy metals, where the state of our gut and our microbiome is not going to be very healthy anyway. And so they're very interconnected. And so looking at that as well. The other thing that's really important that needs to be addressed is also nutritional deficiencies. And this comes back to which came first, the chicken or the egg. Were we nutritionally deficient and we're just trying to get nutrition in by eating lots of foods that aren't actually nourishing us? Or what? And then as a result, then our gut degrades and we don't have the ability to absorb our nutrients, to break our food down, to absorb our nutrients, including things like fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, which is you need like sufficient adequate levels of bile production to actually break the fats down, emulsify them, absorb them. We need good levels of stomach acid. And also things like zinc, vitamin D, like all those elements. Vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. Zinc, we need zinc to make stomach acid, and we also need zinc for healthy gut lining, the lining of our gut, for healthy skin function. We also need healthy amounts of omega-3s in our diet, EPA and DHA, really important for that barrier function, healthy barrier function on our skin. Our skin is an organ and it has a microbiome on it as well, and having a healthy microbiome, having a healthy barriers, because it's barrier protection. And so having all the nutrients, absorbing all the nutrients, also getting it in through your diet. One is what's your diet like, and two, are you absorbing it properly? Which one came first? And so there's this bit of a vicious cycle that happens, and we've got to actually start to address those deficiencies, right? Chromium, magnesium, vitamin D, selenium. Selenium's really important for liver detoxification. Sulfur, liver detoxification. Magnesium for our adrenals. Chromium and manganese for blood sugar regulation. And it's not just, I want to point out, it's not just to do with the amounts. So if you're watching this, don't go out and just prescribe yourself, I'm just going to go and get some zinc, I'm just going to get some chromium. It's also to do with the ratios of those minerals in the body. And so when we're looking at it, we need to look at it in synergistically with how everything else is working. And testing one mineral on its own in isolation is out of context. The same with doing one type of blood test out of isolation without looking at the whole person and the symptoms is out of context. And so we've got to look at it and go, okay, what do we need? And looking at our vitamin and mineral status as a whole is really, really important. Like, how does that relate? One way that I actually do it is I use hair tissue mineral analysis, and I'm really enjoying this process. It's definitely, it's an amazing test that you can do. It tests all your minerals. It also tests heavy metals, and really looking at it as a whole bigger picture of what needs to be addressed. And we can tell a lot from hair tissue mineral analysis of what's going on, and look at, your absorption levels. It can tell how you're absorbing your nutrients, what's the state of your adrenals, what's the state of your thyroid. That can be picked up a lot earlier than what they would in blood testing, as well as, vitamins and minerals. And that's really important. So absorption, addressing those existing deficiencies, and addressing blood sugar levels. The other thing that can increase when we go back to blood sugar levels is anything that increases IGF-1. Dairy is a big contributor to that. So anyone that is working on skin, or I'm working with skin, the first thing I do is I get them usually off the caffeine and get them off the dairy. And so they're the big ones. Other things like sugar, wheat, refined carbs, being really like working a lot on that. And you've really got to actually quit sugar, particularly for a period of time, to get off this. We need support in this. It can be very hard. I have a lot of clients that really struggle with this. And this is also looking at, okay, if sugar is so hard and highly addictive for you, what is happening with your mineral balance? Why is it so hard for you to quit? And it's hard anyway, but it can be a lot harder for someone if they're insulin resistant, if they're low in particular minerals like chromium and manganese. So looking at it from that perspective of, we need to have a full picture of what's really going on, so that it can be, you're not it's not a real struggle for you. And then when we're talking about addiction to sugar, there's the biochemical element of addiction to sugar, and there's also the emotional addiction to sugar, and that element of feeling like you need it and feeling like it's out of control, and using sugar as a crutch to actually soothe yourself and regulate your nervous system, because you don't have the tools to do that, to avoid a pain, fill a void, or actually craving biochemically that sugar, because you either need the energy or you're not getting the energy into the cells and you're not making enough energy. So there's this combination going on. If you're listening to this and you're getting pissed off by me saying you've got to quit sugar, it's probably because you're addicted to sugar. And think about it like this. Are you the type of person that actually hides from the people that you live with or around you how much sugar that you're eating? And if you're hiding it, you've got a problem. right? And so you need to have a plan and have someone that's going to help you work through that from both aspects, the biochemical and the emotional, right? The other things that can affect insulin is sleep, um, magnesium deficiencies, like it's not, and I want to also point out that there is a clear line of quitting sugar is not the same as going low carb. I'm not being like, I quit sugar. I'm just being like, if you have a hormonal imbalance, you've got to curb the addiction and get off that train and stay off the train for a while. And we know how damaging sugar can be, how high consumption of high carbohydrate can be, but it is different to going low carbohydrate. So particularly with women, when we're working with their cycles, you've got different needs at different parts of your cycle. You're going to have different energetic needs. You're going to have different requirements at different part of your cycle. So trying to do the same thing and eat the same every day, this is another rabbit hole, is ridiculous and not possible. And we need to actually start to realize that we've got different needs at different parts of our cycle, and therefore we need to actually eat accordingly, right? So also exercise, high intensity exercise is going to be particularly good. Really starting to do weight, high intensity or strength training, because the more muscle you have, the more sensitive you can be to insulin. And the other thing to point out is, if you are on the pill, is the pill can actually worsen insulin resistance. And this has been shown. So this is really important, like really working on the sugar, the insulin resistance aspect, particularly with acne. What else do I need to tell you? Think they're the main things. And getting some functional hormone testing also, if there is acne present, if you have other symptoms like PCOS, if you have cysts on your ovaries, if you've got excess hair growth, if you have weight gain that you're struggling to lose, looking at what's happening with your energy levels, like putting all those and going, what else is happening in the big picture? Is your thyroid struggling? What's happening with that? Is that also why you're craving sugar? Because you're trying to get sugar in. The other thing to acknowledge with skin, and particularly acne, was, for me, when I actually changed also my skincare routine and made it less complicated. One of the things we do when we're working, like trying to heal our skin, is we have this tendency to also overwash and strip the oil from our skin, and often use products that will strip the oil from our skin. If you're watching this, one of the best things I did was to stop washing my face twice a day. I don't wash my face with anything but water except in the morning, and I do a double cleanse at night. I'm actually now using some really cool products that are like beautiful oil serums and things from Eco by Sonia, and they're been freaking amazing. Um, just feeling the difference in that, completely natural, like organic, but really noticing it, and not washing my skin twice a day makes a really, really, really big difference. I still put an oil on in the morning, or a moisturizer. But that's about it. And it really, like when you do overwash your face, it really does make a difference, because the more you strip the oil from your face, the more your skin will actually make more oil, because it's trying to nourish that barrier, like that skin barrier. So that's really important as well. A lot of people do that. They put a lot of toxic crap on their face, and it actually makes it worse. Not to mention the fact that there's a whole heap of endocrine disrupting chemicals in a lot of our skincare, which can also contribute to hormonal imbalance. So if you have any questions about that, around what you're doing for your skincare, what you're doing for your acne, then let me know. If you would like to have a chat about this, if you're struggling with acne and you're really sick of it, I didn't talk about different types of acne. I'm just talking about acne in general. The other thing to mention, just while I'm on that note, is like there's looking at it where it is in your body can also tell us what's happening in the body. So chest, back, I always think about liver. Sometimes people, like men, often get huge amounts of acne if they've been using if they're having steroid use, like anabolic steroids, that type of thing. I've seen that as well. So depending on what's happening with our body, if we're super toxic as well, I think about liver, often that can be acne, sweating, if there is excess hair as well, like heat and hair can often cause issues, but that's more issues with men that have like lots of amounts of hair. That can be a big problem, but also toxicity, blood sugar levels. It comes back to the same thing, but there's nuances in that, and looking at what else is going on and looking at the whole picture and getting the body back into balance, because it's just a symptom that it's just a sign and symptom that our body is out of balance. We're not meant to have acne. We're not meant to have bad skin. So if that resonated, I do free 20-minute health assessments. I will put the link below if you want to have a chat. It's like completely risk-free, no obligation, but I can explain a little bit more about, or get an understanding of what's going on for you, and explain more about how I work and what that could look like for you, and what the first step is for in that process. And if you've got any other questions about what I just said, pop them in the chat below and I'll get back to you. And I hope you guys have a beautiful day. See ya.